So what is the meaning by this conference? Why do I do this? Yeah, the reason why doing this is educational. Of course, spreading the word, but it's also educational. So Beauty and Ugliness will be and is and will continue to be a conference for educating people on the history of architecture, the possibilities of building new vernacular architecture or new classical architecture. But how do we want to do that? Well, there is a lot of things we don't know, simply. We don't know how the schools were like. We don't know how to bypass all the bureaucracy. There's a lot of things we don't know. How do I think the architecture uprising has played a role in this, in the society, and also for our conference? It has played a huge role, and it's impacting our work in the Beauty and Ugliness, and it's impacting how the students at NTNU look at things, and it's impacting internationally other countries and other societies. So we also channel in all those energy into our conference as well.
Main message of the lecture, that's a really good question, because I thought it was like a multiple informational thing. Main message is the beauty is the key, and we need to relearn how to wield it. Well, I think that you have a magnificent tradition that goes way back from the original houses and stave churches all the way to the 19th, early 20th century architecture that is here. Just get to know your sources and liberate yourself to be able to use them directly. History is not dead. History is here. You are part of it. You're simply an extension of what came before. So you're entitled to use whatever you want that you think can work. The new stuff doesn't have to be different from what came before, if what came before was good and beautiful and worked.
The main message of my lecture was to, as always, I always address the discourse, that we're always looking forward to solve our problems. I want us to be able to look back, because nothing is new under the sun, and there are so many solutions right in front of our eyes if we only allow ourselves to look back for solutions. So that is the main point. I showed some modern problems that can be solved partly with traditional solutions, but there are endless amount. Everything's in our mind if we allow ourselves to look back to solve our modern problems. That like the perception that people before us were as intelligent or even more intelligent than we are today, instead of viewing them as some kind of primitives, and that we are some kind of more advanced human species that are alive today.
I would say I'm trying to get across the idea that we can develop better in the north. Not only that, I think it is imperative that we develop better in the north. With such a unique climate, we need to not only pay extra consideration, but we need to really think about how it was done before and why that worked. And a question I want people to ask themselves is, why do we not do it anymore? Some people might say that the coastline of Tromsø is already ruined, but the reality is the buildings that were built there, they're not going to last 100 years. I'd be extraordinarily surprised if they were. So there will come an opportunity where we not only have the opportunity to, but we are burdened with these buildings and we have to fix them. And when that comes, we should use the opportunity to do it properly, to do it right, because then when they do need work on them, they're not a burden, they're worth preserving, and we'll want to keep them. A city can last for thousands of years, and I see no reason why Tromsø is going to be gone in 100. So why are we not thinking for the incredibly long term? There are complex answers to that might be why, that involve political will and the short-sightedness of architects and developers. But just because they don't choose to see it doesn't mean that it's not worth pursuing. And I think the fact that they choose not to do it shows that we need more public engagement to push them to do it properly. When I promote my ideas in Tromsø, there's usually quite positive reaction. In fact, when I show people the buildings I've drawn, They are directly inspired from Tromsø. So you've got quite a lot of colour, you've got wooden buildings. And if there's one thing I've learned about the people of Tromsø is they are very proud of Tromsø. And the architecture is 100% part of that identity. The only times I get criticism for my plans is when they're students of the modernist academies of some of the work that's done in Tromsø. But broadly speaking, I don't get criticism, which I find a bit annoying because I'd like to have a bit more to work with and work against. But broadly speaking, everyone I show my work to likes it.
What's it like to be the first student for a diploma in classical architecture? That's a good question. Well, it's not as scary as I imagined it would. I feel like there's a lot of positivity towards it, mainly from other students who are very curious about what my process is. And now that I am in my final stages of the project and I've started completing analog drawings, the feedback has been immensely positive because people see what I've produced and they were convinced by it, essentially. And there's a lot of interest from the faculty as well. A lot of people want to ask me questions regarding it because they really want me to succeed. So they drill me quite heavily, but I think it's meant to be constructive, so that they really want me to succeed. So they ask me the tough questions more so than I've otherwise had in previous projects, I feel. Yeah. We've had Sigurd and Jack, and their project was very fascinating, and it's most because of that. And there's been student engagement before. Frederik asked me essentially if I wanted to do the course, and I said yes. So yeah, that's why I'm here.
When we started this architectural course about classical architecture, the response from many of our colleagues, fellow students and professors especially, I would say, was critical at first. They thought it was, you get thrown words at such as Disneyland or pastiche or backdrop for a play, play set. But as we have progressed and learned a lot of this, you can see that the knowledge is spreading and more professors are coming around to accept it as very valid architecture. And they can see that the solutions we are retrieving from the past are also valid to the problems we are facing today. And I would say that among students especially, the classical way of working is really catching on. It is becoming a very popular movement at NTNU now.
The classical architecture studios in Trondheim are born out of frustration for wanting to design something beautiful but not exactly knowing how to. So we figured out we had this professor with all this competence on how to teach classical design, and we just grabbed hold of him and asked him to tutor this proper design studio of classical architecture. And from this there has been a lot of engagement, and today we have run 2 studios in the master program, and the first 2 diplomas of classical architecture are handed in at NTNU, which will be the first in 100 years. So it's all about trying to understand what we have been doing wrong and learning from our mistakes so that we can start designing aesthetically again in a way that everyone wants.
The main message of my lecture was basically to show the richness of Brazilian architecture. Brazil is the biggest country in South America, so whatever happens in Brazil will play a significant role in the other South American countries. So I was just trying to show how rich our architecture is and how Brazil can play a significant role in the traditional movement around the world, especially in South America. It's a big pleasure to be here among so many friends and people who are fighting for a better and more humane architecture. The importance of this conference is very significant, especially for the Nordic countries. I've been walking on the streets here in Oslo, and what I've seen is a bit sad. The architects in Norway have not been so kind with their built environment. So I think this movement and this conference as well is a fantastic opportunity to networking and an opportunity to grow the movement and spread the word to different people.
The main message of my lecture was looking at Adolf Loos's argument that ornament is a crime or criminal, but in reality it goes back into the modernists where they were embracing less is more. But the conclusion is through eye tracking, emulation software, and a couple of experiments, we are looking that ornament actually has the ability to capture our unconscious visual attention. And so by doing that, we say that less is a bore and not less is more. A couple of reasons why the building industry doesn't embrace ornament is because there's the notion that it is too expensive. From a number of projects that I've worked on, we've found that it's only 1% to 2% of the construction budget. And so the better question to ask is, the ethical question is, if we design without ornament, then what kind of detrimental mental health are we causing on individuals who encounter our buildings from a lack of stimulation? And so with that, from a construction industry, I would say there's importance of cultivating the craft of the craftsmen and also the tradespeople, and working with artists and artisans to bring ornament back to life.
So the main message from my talk was that the architecture education at the Christiania Drawing School, which lasted from 1818 to 1910, was actually this almost like full-fledged program, which is sort of new information that was sort of forgotten about. But there's been a lot of documentation showing that they had a really thorough program. Some of it was part-time, some of it was mostly directed at craftspeople, but there were also a large number of architects who came out of that school during the 19th century and up until 1910. And my talk focused, of course, especially on ornament, since that's this year's theme, and I showed how the development of teaching ornament at the school went, I guess you could say like chronologically, but also personally, from studying ancient sources like Greek temples, Roman structures, via studying geometry, studying plants, into going out in the field and doing on-site studies and measured. I think the main point of a conference like this is that it is a sort of place, it is a gathering point where you can meet like-minded people, and you get to learn a lot within a field that might seem very established, but where there's actually a lot of development going on all the time.
I wanted to show this emerging of this particular style, dragon style, which is a style which is not very well known, but it comes from the deep traditional heritage from way back from the Viking area, where we pulled out special ornaments and techniques being used at that time and used in buildings and ornaments. I am eagering very much for historic reconstruction of particular houses, especially one house in Hasselbakken, which is a dragon-style building drawn up by Hoff-Andersen in 1890. And I think it will be, in this historic time we live in, we need some really anchors in the past and reconstruct how it was.
My lecture was about Japanese aesthetics.
Well,
as much as I like classical architecture, I feel we need a lot more to draw from than only classical, meaning European Renaissance architecture or versus modernism. So the world is full of interesting things, and I think Japanese aesthetics and architecture has developed quite far so far as to provide equally strong and interesting perspective on what is good, what beauty for humans, for people. It's important to gather people and discuss architecture on different premises than those given by the modernists. And I think this conference can provide that.
Our work is based on a range of principles that we use, parameter that we use, such as small scale and diverse granularity. We look at proportion and scale, at point of view from the point of view of the visitors and spectators side, as well as from the designer side. So all these things put together make buildings sometimes more humane in their scale, in their proportion. And then we try to see how we can use ornamentation, sometimes also subtle decoration, in ways to underline certain principles. But I think the main important thing for me is a small scale and humane granularity. Very often I'm asked if our work is more expensive than other buildings. And actually it is not. Because what you have to do is you have to compare the same things. If a lot of our work is upmarket, expensive condominium apartments, so residential buildings, and if I compare this same category to buildings that are designed in a more modern style, they are as expensive because they also use very expensive materials and they also use stone cladding. So if you compare the same categories, you will see that there is hardly any difference or no difference at all. Another point here is that about 95% of the building is the building itself. And especially in an urban context where you are building within a block, the exterior shell is only a very small part of it. So we only have to look at, it's maybe a part of 5%. So if within these 5% of the whole building we have maybe a little more expense or a slightly higher budget, that doesn't make a difference in terms of the whole building.
The lecture dealt with the fact that we are facing now a situation of a dramatic change in architecture profession due to the demands of the general public, but also the deep crisis that architecture as a profession is facing, and the fact that approaches to design that have been suppressed maybe for 100 years now are coming to the forefront, and they're being demanded not only by the general public, that certainly, but also more generally as a solution to the problems that the profession is facing.
Yes.
We are managing to introduce now teaching of classical architecture in Trondheim at various levels, from undergraduate to PhDs. We are also facing problems with funding. We have good support within the institution, but at the same time it is not always easy to get everything organized. We have massive support from students as well, which is great, and also architectural uprising, the architectural oppror, has been great help in mobilizing the attention of the general public.
The main message of my lecture was really to demonstrate the variety and capabilities of classicism for incredible varieties of use and its adaptability, in contrast to the coarseness of modernism and how humane and stable it looks. In other words, it is conducive to human health, whereas modernism makes you ill. Society, of course, reacts to my ideas in mostly a hostile way because the professions are dominated by modernists and the politicians as well. But there is an underground swelling of public opinion which actually does not like what's happening to its environment and is questioning it. And that is what I've been trying to do. I've been trying to canalize that and give some form to the objections and to show where the mistakes were made and how they could be rectified.
My message for this conference was a part of the architectural history. I talked about the wooden architecture of the 19th century, styles which is in Norwegian and in German are very often called Swiss, but it's definitely not Swiss, it's more about Neo-Gothic, or at least there were inspirations from several vernacular traditions around in Europe. So because I've done research in this architecture, and I find it difficult to say that architects shall do the same as they did in the 19th century. They may find other ways, and they will definitely need to find their own ways. Myself, I'm not a designer, I'm an historian, and of course there a lot of history to learn from in many ways, I think.
My message on the conference that we are actually ruining our homes because we are building them with very bad materials. We are using materials that are actually poison for us. We need to go back in time and figure out how to live good again, because it's very important for each and every personality health that they are living well. I'm very concerned with people because you are living, the interior architecture is making actually your home, and you are using extremely much time in your place at home. So that's why that one is very important, that you are actually feeling that it's your space, it's your nest.
My message on the conference is to come as a craftsman and to show my work as a craftsman here to all these architects and show that it's possible to keep and restore the old decorations, and don't think that it's hopeless so that you paint over it. And I also wanted to tell that we have to understand that we're not the goal or the after, or we think that we are just reconstructing and restore what's old, but we also have to make our own things and own ideas and own decorations from our time, and not just think that we should restore the old one. So that's my message.
Yes, the title of the talk was Keeping the Styles Alive within a framework of a vernacular or classical architecture. So what I basically did was, after a short introduction, to show examples, cases of how this can be done in practical use. I just said initially that when doing this, there are always a lot of compromises to be done. You have a client who has preferences, there's economy into it, there is regulation, historical or technical, etc. So you have to be somewhat practical when you deal with this. And one other point that I pointed out was that sometimes you can't do full restorations. There are many other concerns. So sometimes you have to choose a style, and that's quite important. You have to make a consistent style. Just not picking this or that is a much better solution to try to make a consistent style in what you are doing, to make it harmonious. regarding that a style is a sort of language which has form and grammar and meaning to it. So if you start introducing and mixing these styles, it's like talking several languages at one time, and that's not very fortunate. Yeah, it was basically some examples about that.
Well, why my message is really that we have to start evidence type planning. We have to find out what worked in history, and we have to start using that in our new planning. And we have to relate it to the local communities, the people, what they think is good for them, and also the history of that particular place, so that this can be affected and transformed onto the new development. I have given up the established architects. I think our education is a modernist kind of indoctrination, and it's very difficult to change this later on in life. So I think we have to get new students, new architects with a new education, and they will have the skills to do what's needed now to create traditional working environments.
I think this conference was, to me, very educational. Our American colleagues coming here and telling us about neuroscience and the eye movement tests, which they now have devised, very impressive. So I think I must go home now and think about what I have done during the 54 years of practice. Have I done it rich enough? Playing with light and shadow enough? Is the variation great enough? Great for children, great for pedestrian movement, and the rich life that we want, first of all, our children to grow up in. Louis Kahn said a nice town should be where you could take your kid in the hand and lead him through the town and tell him, what do you want to be? And during that 10 minutes walk, he could see what I want to be. I want to be a carpenter, a librarian, a doctor, whatever. So that's one thing. And here to see the varied practice of so many clever architects, although I have worked for so many years, I have to reorient myself, I think. In Risør, very special story, because it took so long time before people started thinking about this island. The shipbuilding industry was going to close down, so they had this plot, or this island which would be vacant, ready for erecting whatever, housing, shops. Finally, it was decided it should be housing. Of course, we suggested that it should be maybe a small cafe, coffee shop or something. Did not succeed there, but then they have this very important fishing shop where you can buy a cup of coffee there, you can buy fresh cooked fish balls and so on. So that's very important. And we see now that it's gaining popularity, very important. They sell the houses, and even though they can start as a place to have vacation, many decide to live there permanently. So I have friends that bought flats. In fact, my very close friend, he lives now in the yellow house, renovating his flat, and I think it's becoming a very important addition to Old Risør. So in total, looking back, I think it has been necessary.
My name is Pablo Álvarez Funes. I am a Spanish
architect based in London, and in the Beauty and Ugliness in Architecture conference, I have been talking about initiatives for traditional architecture in Spain, as well as our courses in the Classic Planning Academy, where you can join to us and learn to draw beautiful architecture. Thank you very much.
Well, this conference is important because it's important to meet in person sometimes, and here you meet, good lecturers, you meet good students. I think it's amazing to see the young people who attend here that are aspiring young architects, and they think differently than the architects of my generation. They have a more, let's say, open-minded and open views, and I think what they will make is going to look much better than what we surround ourselves with now. So I have high hopes for the future, and I have high hopes for future conferences as well. Well, the architectural uprising in Norway has been quite a development. It started out with our old friend Eng, who's no longer with us, but some seniors are here still, and we have a young generation coming in, and they're very agile. They use social media, they use the Instagrams, the Facebooks, and they are present there. They're able to get their generation along, and we have so many followers. And it's a new generation that takes over. It's really, and we can see that in the educational institution as well. The students that are entering there now will come out with a different approach. They've watched Harry Potter as children. They're not going to live in monolithic cubes for the rest of their lives. They're going to draw beautiful things, and I think we're seeing some of those sketches here at this conference, both in the talks and on the walls. It's really great to see. Well, the modern architects are probably never going to be impressed by what we're seeing here today. I think that's a lost generation, really. We need to have high hopes in the young people, and from what I see here today, it looks pretty good. They have a good sense of beautiful buildings from the past, and they can rewrite those senses into new designs. And I look forward to seeing when they actually build them. How's it going to look? I think it's going to look good.
What I think is important with this sort of conference is that people who are creative, that they come together. And what I noticed when I came here yesterday, most of the participants then were young people. And then especially I thought what was quite historical really, that it was a group of students from the NTNU University in Trondheim who actually for the first time for generations in this country introduced classical building, and that is almost historical. What I noticed was there were not so many of my generations, there were some of my old generation more among the people who had talks. But these young people, that really was interesting. That is a way, in a way, something absolutely new. You see, a few days earlier, I was among the audience in a big conference here in Oslo about the relationship between the architects and the public. And there you saw all the establishment of Norwegian architects. They were all there. Whereas in the conference, when I came here yesterday, it was just young architect student types. I didn't see a single soul among the prevailing circles of architects in Norway. They should have gone and heard what those young people had to contribute.
To me, this conference represents a change. This is we have now united all of the classical forces all around the world. It's been scattered during the last 80 years, and now tonight I feel that we have reunited them, and we are ready to have a common course for the future.